When I think back to every mid-century house I've ever stood in, I would still put Adrian Kinney's home right at the top of the list. It's not a time capsule by a famous architect. Well, it is a Cliff May, but when Adrian found it, the 90s had really done a number on the place. He lovingly restored it and upgraded it to perfectly suit his own taste and to be a perfectly sociable extroverts hosting hub. And it's a work in progress, which I appreciate. Adrian loves to remodel, so he's currently in the process of redoing some of his first choices, more modern ones, into mid-century recreations. And since he's been steeping himself in the world of MCM for well over a decade and has now restored 7 Cliff May homes for himself and his partner, or on behalf of others, he knows whereof he speaks. So today, I'm giving you another chance to chat with Adrian about what are the features of a mid-century home that makes it a true unicorn for him, and for me too, and how to go about finding yourself a mid-century home at all in this economy. He is the expert. Hey there, welcome back to Mid-Mod Remodel. This is the show about updating MCM homes, helping you match a mid-century home to your modern life. I'm your host, Della Hansman, architect and mid-century ranch enthusiast. You're listening to episode 1802. By the way, if you're curious about Adrian, his work, and his gorgeous house, I'll put some more info and photos that I got to snap when I visited into the show notes page. Find that at midmod-midwest.com/1802. Or you can also check out our previous chat. That would have been episode 1004. We had a lot of fun talking about our backgrounds in design, what draws us to mid-century homes, the works. If you like this, you'll like that. But for now, without further ado, Adrian Kinney on Unicorn Mid-Century Homes. Let's get into it. So my question for you, Adrian, is what is a unicorn house for a realtor who gets to look into cool mid-century houses all the time? What are the features of your dream house?
Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, I get to see quite a few really cool houses out there, specializing in the mid-century modern field that I do. And now having been in it for, 13, 14 years, I've seen some cool ones. So coming across the unicorns, they're still really rare. And in my world and love, I'm pretty much a purist at heart. So the more original, most authentic houses, those are the ones that really are my unicorns, where they've been untouched for 50 or 60 years. Mm-hmm. And just by that nature alone, they're rare because they just have everything that is purely perfect from the era. The
for
goods
you,
and the bads.
It's a time capsule.
Yes.
That's always going to do it. Yeah.
Yes, those are the ones that do it. I love a good architect house, like somebody that, especially in the Denver metro area, that's got a good name behind it and has the story. Mm-hmm. I think my personal bias, because I'm a tinkerer with houses, that I love to kind of mess with all of them. I lean towards the post and beam type houses, where I've probably covered this with some of your design clients.
Yeah.
They're easier to manipulate because they don't really have load-bearing walls. They're basically a giant barn.
Yeah.
And for my sake, and we have mostly crawl spaces in Colorado, all of the electrical and plumbing runs through the crawl space. And so in my world, I'm like, let's just manipulate this or that. All I got to do is go to the crawl space and mess some things up and then pop it up to the new room. Those are my favorites, kind of the time capsules that are post and beam, because then they could be manipulated easy for my sake to do some small tweaks to them. Yeah. Versus like a true architect's house. They're perfectly built that if you want to touch a wall or do a little bit of work to it, they're a little bit heavier of a lift because it's such a thought out piece of art.
Right. There is sort of a jigsaw puzzle effect too. The more something is designed, and I find myself doing this when I'm working with someone, as I'm putting pieces in and I'm thinking, man, if someone ever wants to change this later, they're going to have a lot of undoing to do.
Absolutely.
When you do a lot of built-ins and you do a lot of like, let's push in on this wall here and do storage in the other direction. Whereas a post and beam house gives you such a wonderful sort of structural element and kind of a blank slate to slip pieces around, flip a bathroom and a bedroom, get the best view, that sort of thing. So to you personally, is a house that needs something done to it actually more fun than a house that is perfect in itself? Is sort of like, what could you change? What would you change you shouldn't?
Oh, totally. That's a great question. There's been a couple time capsules that I've seen that I absolutely wouldn't touch even a single thing. Like the layout is absolutely perfect. As a general thing, I just have trouble touching time capsules in just a general sense because they're just so amazing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if it's something I plan to live on for a while, there's still a kind of like, how do I make it work for today's world? Because there are a couple things, the washer and dryer in the kitchen, not usually a to-go for today. I'm sure there's other spots we could find for it, which requires altering a little bit. Yeah, I think I like the ones that need a little work. As you've been to our house and you kind of see behind us, everything here is not original to the house, but it's an original piece or made to kind of mock or be an original piece that would have been here. So I do enjoy that recreation factor. And as we've done in our house, we've kind of been able to see so many amazing houses throughout the Denver metro and Palm Springs areas that we were able to like pick and choose the perfect things from each of the houses we like, that we're like, oh, we love this from the Idris house in Palm Springs and this house from this house in Denver, and then put it into our house currently. That's like, cool. It's like a mishmash of every perfect mid-mod thing in one little house. So I do enjoy that part, that I can recreate like the perfect combo house.
Yeah.
But it's still like when it's all original, and that's the spot in my heart right there for that.
Those are the ones, I mean, when I'm looking, if I'm poking around on Zillow or if I get invited into someone's house, those time capsule houses that are perfection are the ones I always drool over. But then I know myself, and I like to tweak. And of course, for the work that I'm doing, when I work with clients, I actually like it when their home needs something. I mean, it's great. It's got great bones. There's some great feature we can emphasize, but the reason we do a master plan isn't because the house is perfect. It's because the house needs work. So the question of what's the ideal house to work versus what is the ideal house to find is maybe a little bit distinct, but yeah. So you've picked some of the favorite features you have, and your house is maybe a perfect example. If you were just to like list what are the items of a unicorn house, you've assembled them. You've got the fireplace with glass above and below. You've got the sort of open plan layout between your kitchen and your sitting area. You've got some fun screen walls. What else have you added that you've really loved to this house?
Totally. And we're in process of redoing. I think you were here in the middle of some of the stuff, because I'm tinkering. So that's again just my advice is, we're narrowing it down. We're doing things. It is so the bathrooms we're in the process of working on, and we're taking them back to full period correct with the 4.25 tile, with the blue bathroom, and yellow bathroom, and the pink bathroom.
Oh, great.
So it's not done, but it's a in process thing. And we're, ordering the tile from B&W, trying to get the original everything in there. So that's something I love, is actually recreating it, doing a nice, like the primary bath has the 5-piece, the shower, the bath, the 2 sinks, and the toilet, but we can make it a mid-mod vintage one, but in today's layout. And that's that kind of combo I like, where it's authentic as much as it can be with the original pieces. And I've got original crane sinks that are going in, but it's a layout in today's fashion. So that's, again, that kind of nice that unfortunately it was renovated in the 90s and early 2000s in our house, so it didn't survive fully original. So I'm able to kind of take back to what have been a better bath built here with the materials of the era, which is great. Right. We have basically the whole back we opened up. So every room in the back has a door to the outside, which again is that just modernist connection to the outdoors. We're in and out. It's a small footprint by normal standards, but it just lives so much bigger because you've got so many doors to the inside and outside, which I absolutely love. So that's been a fun part that we've added into it as well. Yeah. And probably the kitchen, that we were able to kind of do the layout that we wanted. But again, we added in some nice today commercial appliances, but kept as much of the feel of original as we could. Again, kind of, traversing the 2 different sides of, full purist, because nothing was here originally, but then putting in what we could for it. But then probably my ultimate favorite is the lighting. I go a little crazy with the lighting. So all of the, hanging lights, the, sconces, everything, they're all vintage fine. So we put in all the electrical work for it, and then we're able to connect these pieces to the different electrical works to have like full vintage lighting in the house. And that's the fun part I've been able to bring in that I really love, is that lighting portion of everything.
And that's something you can go and find salvaged, vintage stores, estate sales. And so you don't have to find that in a house. Although if you find a house that has all its original lighting and it's gorgeous, it's cherry on top. But So it sounds like, in fact, it's not a particular house that's a unicorn to you. It is the ability to take a house and continue to build onto it and make it even better. And
that's a lot of it. And I've noticed it over the years of like, there's been some, I always go back to the Idris house, which is in Palm Springs. That's probably the most perfect house, in my opinion, I've ever seen. That, it's been kept to the time capsule. Its location is absolutely amazing. The primary bath is to today's standard. It's massive. It has enough that one, I wouldn't absolutely touch a single thing in that type of house. Besides that, most of the houses, there'd be a couple little tweaks to kind of make work for today's standards for things here and there.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, I'm a masher of, let's pick and choose the most perfect from, the Cliff May house we have. For instance, in our house we have currently, the Cliff May we lived in beforehand, he put all the light switches lower, part in full because he didn't like them to be in eyesight. And the other part was they were cross-framed walls that went up. So where the light switches normally go, they weren't able to put the actual switch because of the cross-framing. So they ended up at about hip height. So they're again out of sight, but also from necessity. So when we redid this house here in Linwood, we actually put all the light switches at that lower level to kind of bring back from our Cliff May that we love that they were just lower and then stayed out of eyesight. And then just kind of that homage back to what we had in the Cliff May house. So it's again, back to that piecemealing of, only the Cliff Mays have them down there. Well, why don't we do that in our house? Because there was a great reason behind it. So that kind of putting things together, we've loved to do as we go through different houses and then do our own house in the very end.
Oh, that is so much fun. Well, and I think that leaves a lot of positivity for people who are trying to find and purchase a perfect house, that if you're willing, if you enjoy the process of personalizing a little bit, you can make your unicorn house from scratch or from good raw materials, at least from the right shell. And maybe that's the topic for another talk, is how to find a house that could be a shell, even if it's not the perfect house, the house that's ready to be the perfect house with a little work. All right.
Absolutely. Well, especially in this market as stuff for finding, it's hard to find. So I think it's a great topic to talk about.
Right. I want to ask you about what we need to know about finding a mid-century home in this general realty economy, and what you can do if you can't find your dream home, what kind of compromises you might make to find a home that could work.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a great question right now. Obviously, my expertise here is in the Denver metro market, but what we're seeing here is actually a pretty common thread throughout all of the US, that our supply is still very tight. And that's the supply of homes that are listed for sale on the open market. And the overall numbers have finally increased, but when you break it down to what I call, good homes, or what check enough boxes for most buyers, that number is still, unfortunately, really, really low. Again, seeing in the Denver area, a lot of stuff does make it past that first weekend and does sit for a couple of weeks. But the really good stuff, it's still unfortunately going in 3 days, usually a little bit above list, not as crazy, but it's still getting really tight. So I get that same question from my buyers that are like, hey, here's my stats of what I'm looking for, my bed, bath, price range, location. Like, what are the odds of a house like this actually coming up? And we chat about it. And unfortunately, it's not great. Especially if you're a normal buyer in that normal price range in your area, there's a lot of y'all looking for it. And, finding something that's unique and different seems to be a little bit more on trend than just, a ticky-tacky box. And those are more a dime a dozen. So I'll talk a lot with my buyers about, hey, what are the odds of the areas you're looking for, something coming up that might fit what you're looking for, and kind of work through the reality of, okay, if it does come up, is it going to be competitive? Are you going to be able to compete? And we really talk about what is that unicorn feature and what maybe can be given up or recreated in the house that's super unique that might actually work. And a lot of stuff is honestly the hard characteristics of a house, the square footage, the bed and bath count as it sits, and the condition of all the major systems, the HVAC, the roof, the plumbing, the electrical. Those are kind of honestly the less negotiable side of things, because sure, you can add a bed and bath, but if it's a true mid-mod and you've got 1,000 square feet that you're working with, adding a bed and bath in is going to be a little bit tight. So you want to make sure that you've kind of got, besides adding an addition, that what you're looking for actually makes sense in those characteristics of, okay, gosh, I really need to stick to that 1,000 square feet because that's, I don't want bigger or smaller. Maybe we need to, give up this or that because of that reason.
What do you do in that situation? Yeah, I was just talking with someone who they would like to be a master plan client of mine, but they're looking for the house. And fortunately for them, they used to live in their dream house. And then for purposes of employment, they had to move. This has made their search for a new house very hard, because to give up your unicorn house and then go looking for something else, and then to go looking for it in this economy, she basically had come to the place about a year later to say, okay, what do I have to give up? Do we have to plan to add on? Do we need to start looking at flipped houses that we put mid-century elements back into? Where can it give? Because we're not finding it. And I'm so glad that I get to talk to you about that right now, because I think the answers can depend. And of course, it depends on energy level and price point and what you're interested in doing. But Do you feel like there are certain things that people see as deal breakers that are actually not as big of a bar to finding and modifying your house as someone might assume?
Yeah, and I have a biased lens that I look through on this, and I always remind my clients, and a lot of it I think is the general workload of
Mhm.
how heavy of a lift is this going to be to renovate something.
Right.
I know in one of our other talks we talked about a post and beam house, and that's the style it is. It leads to an easier renovation, and that's where I
Yeah.
always get in trouble with my clients. Is they're like, easy, like you've done one, like I'm actually buying a fix and flip tomorrow to take on like it's relative. It's one of those of
Right.
like,
Easy
okay,
if you like
yes,
it.
yes, and like yes, I know I've done a lot of houses, so to me, it's like, oh, unless it's like completely collapsed, it's no brainer. Like I got it. But I think that's one that I think a lot of folks may look over, and again, it's through their lens as well, as you've seen with your clients, where you're like, oh, this is an easy project, and they're hyperventilating in the background because they're like, what does you mean easy? This is the most insane thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
And I think that's one that goes back to, I know it's a big motto of y'all's of kind of finding the right team.
Mhm.
And that's a big part of it is, when you look with the real estate agent initially to kind of find the house that you want, make sure that professional has a good background and experience. Always put for myself that, I've done fix and flips and design work and all that, that I really help my clients see beyond what's there, that if they want to do renovations, I can at least prep them of like, hey, you might be able to put a bath here, you might not. These
Yeah.
systems are new and old, the plumbing's new or old. That way they get a good idea of, hey, we had XYZ budget. This might or might not actually fit because of what you've told me about it. And
Yeah.
that way I can tee them up for someone like you that does renovations and helps kind of do a master plan with them, that they can figure it out of like, cool, Adrian said these things about this house. Now I can talk with you and figure out, hey, this is great. Now we can do it for our renovation. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest things that gets overlooked is the true factor of how much of a bite do you want to take and chew from it. And that's
Yeah.
obviously very personal for people of, part of it's budget and part of it's the mental anguish they have to go through to actually get it done.
Right.
And
Or their life
it's,
stage, or even, I mean, for
yes,
this client, I was really trying to steer her towards she might need to choose a house that's been flipped and remove some of those previous changes. And to her,
absolutely.
it just feels so painful to waste the emotional and the embodied energy of like
Yeah,
somebody bought this from Home Depot and put it in the house and I'm going to take it out and throw it away. And so we'd be talking about like, what could you restore? What could you find other sources for? But the psychological things are factors as much as a price point sometimes.
oh, absolutely they are. And I had a great example of that client. We were looking in the area by where they lived currently. And unfortunately, just the type of house they wanted in the area was just too much for what their budget could support. So we
Mm-hmm.
started looking out just 2 or 3 miles from the house, and we came across a really cool little enclave of just classic mid-century ranches. Again, nothing to write home about, but their price point, what the price per square foot was, they had some views of downtown. It was a really unique spot that they were. Unfortunately, it was a grazed out, really basic flip that was there. Almost no character was left in the house. But these buyers were actually excited about, again, the bones of the house were in great shape. The location was prime for them, but they could see past, yes, it's all grazed out. It's all like not exciting, but they could do as a blank slate to them in that case, where it was well under their budget. Their monthly payment was perfect. They could live in it, which was really nice. They didn't have to, move in and be like, my goodness, this is this is a lot for day one.
Falling
But
down or it's unsafe. Yeah.
yeah, like holy moly, it was livable, and that way they could kind of really get a feel for how the house lived, and then add in those fun mid-century characteristics. Maybe not full on mid mod, but at least bring back some of that cool, the warm tones, the wood elements, some screen
Yeah.
walls to separate the stair, just some little stuff to really make it feel less flippy and Home Depot-y like in
Yeah.
circa 2015 to 2025. And so
Go
that
everywhere.
exactly to that thing where they were like, it's not great, it's more soulless, it's not awesome, but it's very livable, and the price point was great. So it's just like to your client there that they were wondering like, gosh, can I even do this even though it's completely not their taste personally? Definitely it's a great route to go because it isn't a complete disaster. It's livable, and you can kind of take a couple of months before you jump into the project.
And I think you're right, particularly for people who want to project sort of piecemeal rather than who are hoping to come in and have something done all at once.
Yes.
Choosing a house that's been flipped is disheartening, but it's much more sort of rollbackable than if the house has major structural issues or major layout issues that you can't live in that while that happens. You need to sort of budget for a general contractor. It's just unless you're a huge enthusiast, it ends up being not a manageable DIY job, certainly not for a first time.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely is. And I've had, folks look at that too. And it's a lot to take on sometimes. And that goes back to that, what you're willing to take on. And if it's, in your actual wheelhouse to make it work. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And that kind of goes back to the, hey, what do you want to do as far as, what things can you give up and what things can you keep to make sure that you still get the house you want, but also the reality of, my gosh, this is a, 6-figure project, or yeah, this is a DIY. We can totally do it and just get a little bit of help project.
Mm-hmm. Right. It becomes, eventually it becomes your entire personality, but it starts as a hobby and then, you kind of go from there.
Yeah, it does. It literally becomes your personality. So sorry to everyone coming down the rabbit hole eventually, but it very much does.
Warning sign. I mean, we like it here. So
yeah, the water's fine. Come on in.
Great. All right. Well, this has been really helpful. I think optimistic for people who are struggling to find what they're hoping to find, maybe a little bit of a reality check, but in the future, and I think with the type of thinking that I like to apply to a house, how can you bring back charm that's been lost? And with the search parameters of just like, maybe you have to look a little bit further, maybe you have to look at something that's been subway tiled and whitewashed. There's hope for
it's exactly right on. No, there really is. And that's exactly it, that there's, the search isn't over thing. I know folks aren't as, crazy motivated as they were because it's not a crazy market, but they really do want to purchase something. So you're right on exactly in that point that, there are some compromises to be had, but homes are still fixable. And yes, it might be sad that you saw the previous photos and it was absolutely perfect. But the reality is, someone did get it before you, they did flip it. And that is a story that you will see over and over again. Yeah. And if you're just not in a position to grab it first, find one of these that you can actually add your touch to that's close enough and really make it a dream house, just kind of from a different angle.
And then, then it's your forever home. Or if you have to move on in a couple of years, you've made a better option for somebody else. So
absolutely. Yeah. You kind of fix the gray washing.
All right. Well, I think that's very hopeful to end on. Great.
Yes, I think so too. And I appreciate you having me on. This has been great to talk again.
Excellent. See you again soon.
Great.
So I guess the question really is, are you going to hold out for a unicorn mid-century house? Can you afford to? Can you stand the house you're in? Or maybe you don't even want one. Maybe you are looking for a project. Maybe like Adrian, like me, you're up for finding a house that can work and then crafting it into your actual literal dream house. If you wanted to dig a little deeper on that idea, find the transcript of this episode and the link to the resources we discussed in the show notes at midmod-midwest.com/1802. I will be chatting again with Adrian sometime soon, and we'll get into how to find the right team of people to help with mid-century home search and the process of tailoring your mid-century home to your life. Plus, we'll also debate what are the exact qualities that make a house mid-century, the date, the features. What else? Speaking of make it mid-century, next week I'll be sharing a conversation with Susan Halla, the mind and the muscle behind Make It Mid-Century. By the way, if you're enjoying these mid-century mastermind conversations, let me know who else I should be talking to. The odds are I may already know them from the internet and I've just been too introverted to ask them onto the podcast. Give me a reason. Or, if I don't know them, I'll be glad to add them to our little world of people who love mid-century design. Shoot me an email or a DM. Share some names. All right, catch you next time, Mid-Mod Remodeler.